Sometimes you work on a project because you want to, or you have been planning a really cool gadget or widget or something. Sometimes a ridiculous amount of wind blows your trampoline into your neighbor's yard. That's what happened to me, and I took it as a sign that I needed some structural intervention into the trampoline wind wars. After recovering the trampoline from the neighbor's yard, my recommendation to you, if you find yourself doing this in the future, is to acquire the help of an accomplice. I was able to roll the trampoline across the neighbor's yard without managing to damage their property, and I was glad that the trampoline had not broken any windows on its overnight excursion. Wrestling with such a large object is a bit of a task, and it doesn't give you a lot of good angles of attack, so get some help. Only slightly worse for wear. I suppose I could get some fishing line to mend this, but I'll save that for another day. Some of the net supports were a little bent from the trip, but all in all, it survived all right. It could have been much worse and collapsed the whole thing, but it still seems very functional. I shuffled the trampoline over the wall and back into our yard, so all was good-ish. I needed to go to work, so I did some thinking on this throughout the day. Obviously, I needed to tie this crude airfoil to something or anchor it. Now, the years at college had told me that for a large surface area, if it can achieve a positive angle into the wind, a fair amount of lift is created. Also, for such a large surface area, a small pressure difference can have a huge impact. That's how hydraulics work. I did some math. A 12-foot diameter trampoline gives me 113-inch square feet, which is about 16,250 square inches. If I can achieve a pressure differential of 1 psi across this thing, it will produce more than 3/4 of a ton of lifting force. I didn't do the calculations on the pressure differential at a given angle of attack, but the point is that for such a large area, you need to avoid getting an edge up off the ground. I now had some options. Either place a ton of weight somewhere on the beast to contain it, or tie it down with enough ropes and anchors to hold it in place. I decided anchoring would be the best option. For me, ratchet straps and stakes were the obvious choice, but I didn't want to permanently occupy my ratchet straps for the purpose. I also didn't want to buy more straps. For a cheapskate like myself, $10 is $10, so I thought about designing a solution. I mean, hey, I'm an engineer. We solve problems. I should be able to come up with something. Famous last words, I know. My idea was to make a rope wrench instead of a ratchet. I should be able to reasonably do this with leftover wood and some pegs or screws. I made some concept sketches, which left a lot to be desired. As for an anchor, I don't have any tent stakes, and I don't think they would work well on the ground in my house. The landscape is all rock, and I think below that is pretty sandy soil, so not much to grab the stake with. I figured what might work is to bury a significant-sized piece of wood or a wooden cross and tie to the center of that with a rope. If I bury it down a foot or so, I believe it would have the strength to stay down, especially if it's tamped down pretty well. Another alternative would be to bury concrete block as the anchor, but I don't have any of those. The idea is that the rope is connected to the anchor and the outer rim of the trampoline. The rope winch will take up the slack in the rope and keep the trampoline edge from lifting. As long as wind is hitting the side and going over the top, it will avoid a lot of the aerodynamic forces that would try to lift the trampoline. Once the tramp edge lifts and presents an angle to the wind, it's pretty much game over. So the important thing is to have the anchor strong enough to resist the side loads, which will be much less. With the ropes pulled tight, the wind would have to create enough force to break one of the ropes in order to lift a side of the trampoline. So I think we're doing okay. So I raided the garage to find usable materials. I found some 1-foot long cutoffs from some project. It's ugly, but it should work. I also found some dowel pins. These would work well for my rope wrench idea. I saw that the box on the dowel pin said 3/8 inch, so I got a 3/8 inch drill bit. Nothing could be easier. I drew some lines and cut holes, roughly center line on the wood planks. I then went to glue and install the dowel pins. There's an old adage, measure twice, cut it wrong. After splitting one of my boards, I found that there were 2 sizes of dowel in my small collection. 3/8 inch was not a problem, but there were apparently a bunch of 7/16" dowels mixed in. Actually, one of the boxes was labeled as such, but who reads that stuff anyway? Seeing that my prototype Mark I parts were going to be ugly anyway, I decided to wobble the bit around to widen the hole. This was the largest bit from my index, and I wanted to prove the concept more than make it look real nice. If it works, I can come back and fix the imperfections. Creation is an iterative process. At least, that's what I'm going to choose to believe. Workshop scraps only provide so much, and I ran out of dowels, so to finish it off I used some screws in one of the rope wrenches. I also didn't round over any edges or paint or finish these. Like I said, concept work, just concept work right now. I took it all out to the trampoline and marked some locations for setting the anchors. Not having a lot to work with, I found some other old bits of some hardwood cutoffs that had been used as spacers or blocks for a trailer, I believe. I decided they would work for a while. Seeing as how I was going to bury these and they were unfinished wood, they're going to rot relatively quickly, but as we are hoping to move in a few months, this didn't concern me. Some sort of protection would be required for even a semi-permanent build. I began to dig the holes for the anchors. Remember that sandy soil I thought I had? Oh, what a laugh. About 4 to 6 inches down, I hit clay hardpan. Not cool. I fought as best I could with the spade to get some purchase, but since I didn't have a pickaxe or other suitable implement, or the mental disposition to deal with digging a hole 18 to 24 inches down into this garbage, I only got a few inches deeper into this hard clay. Decided to go with it, also suboptimal, but I digress. I tied a rope to each block and set them as deep as I could. Seeing as how the dirt had a high clay content, I decided to add some water and tamp it down real well when I put it back in the hole. I'm hoping that the clay will air dry into the same hard pan I encountered and provide me with a bit more holding power on the anchors. Once the holes were covered, I tied the anchors to the trampoline and attached the wrenches. This could have proven disastrous. I tightened the slack and tensioned the ropes with the wrenches. The rope wraps around the 2 close set pegs, and the third one rests against the rope to hold the tension and keep the wrench from unwinding and falling off. I came back later and secured the wrenches as a precaution, but the wrenches are self-locking. I thought the ropes would pull out the anchors under the tension, but they held firm. I lifted on the trampoline edge, and it's definitely more secure than it was before. This is something of a temporary solution. The anchors need to be better. I'm thinking bricks or cinder block would be the best option, and I might have tried to church up the wrenches a bit and cut them to look a little nicer. I had thought about making these without the pegs, which could be done by cutting slots into the wood instead of drilling holes. That design would be slightly more difficult to use. When I make Mark II, I think I will get the correct dowel and drill bit combination, round over the edges of the wood strips, finish and paint them to match the trampoline, and use a cinder block as the anchor instead of wood blocks. The concept works, and if I use the correct anchors, the rope is the weak link. I used 4 anchors and 1 rope tied to each. Considering the rope as the weak link in the system is pretty secure. A cinder block buried 18 inches down would probably be able to hold 2 strands of 550 cord. With 4 anchors and 2 ropes apiece, this setup could provide close to 2 tons of hold down force. That should be enough to help the trampoline fight against the strongest wind that I should see here in my hometown. I guess we'll see, but at least for now, the concept is working.